On this week's podcast, I'd like to start a conversation about ego. While ego is not a bad thing per se, because you do need to have confidence in yourself, you do need to be proud of your efforts and the things you do, but ego can sometimes get in the way of your life and your ministry and your help to others when it becomes more about the recognition or moving even into being conceited with look at me, look at the things that I've done. Uh, Ego can get in your way when it becomes the driving force for what you do. When you get into conversations with other people, you can't even open a window to listen to others who might have differing opinions on issues that I don't want to say non-essential issues, because all issues are essential. When I talk about non-essential issues, I'm talking about those issues where someone is not harmed, um, uh, as in racism. I don't believe in getting in conversations about racism to hear someone else's point of view. I really don't. If you're racist, you really can't justify that. And trying to justify it or justifying your actions, say these are not racist when at the root is racism, that is a problem. So I'm not talking about that when I'm talking about, for the most part, when I talk about conversations and differences in opinion and differences of beliefs, I'm not talking about those things where a group of people is squashed. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about racism or homophobia or transphobia or ageism or any of those things that, where a group of people works to oppress and put down another group. Even if they say that's not what they're doing, by their actions, they really are. Okay, that's not what this is about today. Today is about ego. And this is really a one-on-one. Each person has to deal with their own ego or their own self-importance more than as a collective. This really is, although there are some organizations that have a collective ego about themselves and their organization, or maybe even their denomination, but this conversation today is not really about that. This conversation is about the personal ego, what you think and feel about yourself, and how you interact with others based on your own perceptions of yourself, where you have elevated yourself to the place where no one is worthy of a conversation with you. Maybe to some extent, in some situations, especially dealing with those things that I'm calling uh, uh, the things that I don't call the non-essentials, like the things about racism and all that. I do have a pretty healthy ego that I'm completely right in those issues. And I don't apologize for that, because I don't think that's about me being right or about me elevating myself above people that had different uh, racist beliefs. No, that's about the true right and true wrong, and fighting for the true right and true wrong. But when your ego and what you think of yourself gets in the way of being able to minister to others, because you know, ooh, I don't want to be around them for whatever reason, or uh, that person does not that person does not possess significant intellect to converse with me on these topics. Um, I have to work on that, actually. There are some people that I have no desire to have conversations with, because uh, my true feelings and beliefs, which I need to continue to work on this. My true feelings and beliefs is they do not possess significant intellect to have an intelligent conversation with me on those things. Um, the things that they say are grounded in ignorance, or in stereotypes, or in what they hear from the people around them, and or traditions, what they've been taught and believe for generations. And it is true that sometimes people reach the place where they are unable to have conversations with someone else with differing beliefs because they are unwilling to even consider that they might be wrong. And that becomes problematic. So when dealing with people like that, I do have probably an over healthy ego myself. And for right or wrong, I do believe some people don't possess an adequate amount of intellect to converse with me. People that bury their head in the sand and refuse to consider things. I continue to find myself appalled by people over a simple thing as getting a vaccine. Well, I'm not sure they know what. Well, you have zero medical qualifications, so why would you think that your thinking is superior to that of the medical community? I recently was at a church function, sitting around a table, and I don't know who brought up vaccines. It's one of those things that if I can excuse myself from conversation, I just go somewhere else, because it just, to me, it destroys relationship. Because really, with the issues I have controlling my own ego, it's like if I'm at a table and we get to a conversation where it's like, someone says something where I downgrade them from being qualified to have intellectual conversations with me, then it's like, I'm done with you, and that's not really right either. But this man was talking about. I really don't even know how this conversation came up, because almost everybody around the table were supporters of getting your vaccine so you don't get sick and so you don't make other people sick, or so you don't actually kill people, which was a situation in this church my mother used to go to in East Texas, where people refused to take their vaccines, knew they had COVID, went to church, and got people, some elderly people, so sick that they had to move into nursing home and can never live by themselves again. So I mean, that's pretty abhorrent behavior, that when people do things like that. Well, anyway, we're having this conversation about vaccines. I don't know. I think someone at the table just gone and got their COVID and their flu vaccine shot. And then I said, yeah, I just did that a few weeks ago as well, and both my arms were tired. And a man across the table said, no, I don't do any of that. And it said, I actually had COVID, and it wasn't any worse than the flu. And I didn't keep my mouth shut. I probably should have. And I just looked straight across and said, well, I had 5 friends that died that first summer of COVID. So don't tell me it's the same as the flu, because that's not true. And then he was talking about, says, well, I wasn't going to get that vaccine. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. And in my mind, I'm thinking, what an idiot, what a moron you are. And I don't know if that's my ego saying I can classify him. If it is, I am unrepentant in that, because I stand firm to what I said. The guy's an idiot and a moron. And then he says, it was so terrible. We wanted to fly to Canada, and we couldn't fly because we didn't have our little vaccine card. So I called my friend who knew a pharmacist, and he gave us one, and we filled it out ourselves so we could fly. Now, granted, he was talking about a time early on in the pandemic when there was no effective medicine, there were no effective treatments, and a portion of the population died. And then, thank goodness, a very quiet man who hardly ever says anything at church or anything was sitting next to me, and he said, that makes me extremely uncomfortable and upset that a professional would hand out cards and let people fill in and create their, so they could fly. He says, well, I don't care. I wanted to fly, and they were going to tell me what to do. And then I thought about, okay, what about everybody else on the plane at that time? So I think that is a good example of that man's ego, that he knew better than the entire medical community, the entire aviation community, and their requirements. And so he was going to lie and cheat to get around that. Now, you heard at the beginning, this was at a church function. It was a Wednesday night dinner that I had at church for a group within the church. I was stunned. I was stunned. And I know there are people like that. Was I stunned to the point that I could never be around this person? No. Will I ever engage in a conversation purposefully with this person? No. But when they bring it up and say dumb stuff like that, I'm going to make at least one comment. I will. It's like, well, don't tell me it's the same as getting the flu. I had 5 friends who died. And I don't think I've ever had any friends, and I'm in my 7th decade of life. I haven't had any friends that have died of the flu. So, anyway, so where does that come from? Ego? Well, this man who refused to take the vaccines because no one's going to tell him what to do. And it's like, vaccines have saved the lives of many people. When my parents were children, it was at the time right before they had discovered the polio vaccine. And kids having to live in iron lung. One of my cousins had polio when she was young, and it twisted her whole face. Her eyes wouldn't close. It was very difficult to understand her when she spoke because of her slurred speech. And now she also had some mental challenges as well. At the time, the term is mental retardation. Now it's cognitively challenged, I think is the proper word for that. But she had polio as a little girl. And I still remember my grandpa talking about that Kathy was such a beautiful little girl before she had polio. And my dad was just a little younger. I mean, was just a little older than this cousin of mine. My dad was the 6th of 7 children, and my cousin's mother was the 2nd of 7 children. So it was like her oldest daughter wasn't that much younger than my dad, and my dad caught polio at that time as well. He had a very mild case. Most people didn't notice it, but if my dad when my dad smiled, one side of his face didn't move, and most people never knew that. You could look at my dad, and he didn't have a lot of facial expressions when he smiled or laughed. Anyway, even when I was a kid and he was upset with me and my brother, we talked about he gritted his teeth like this. When he talked through his teeth, you knew you were in trouble. But he didn't have a lot of movement in his face, and I wonder if that was also a part of his what he had gotten from his mild case of polio. But at the time, anyone that knew my dad, I mean, he was funny, he had a sense of humor. But even when he talked, his face did not move a lot when he did that. Actually, his aunt, my Aunt Isla, my grandfather's only sister, only sister that lived past her 20s. It was funny because when she would laugh, her face wouldn't move. She was a Pentecostal preacher, wore hair in the bun, didn't shave her legs, always wore skirts, although as I understand, when she was a wild girl when she was young, when her parents, my great-grandfather, homesteaded in New Mexico territory. And then they moved back to Texas, Oklahoma area later. But she didn't, my Aunt Isla, her face did not move when she laughed. You'd hear her laugh. and her face did not move. And so my dad was that way. He did, a lot of his face did not move when, he was laughing or joking, or when he was angry at my brother and spoke teeth. And I know that if he tried to smile real big, one side of his face did not move up. And I wonder if that was part of, all I ever knew my dad was, he didn't have a lot of facial movement in his face. So I don't know. Maybe the whole thing was connected to polio. I don't know. But now there are people saying that it was wrong that back in the 40s they forced everybody, the 40s, 50s, and 60s, forced everyone to get a polio vaccine. No, they shouldn't have done that. Well, do you know how many more people that'd be affected by polio without that vaccine? It's like, I really don't understand the aversion to vaccines. I have read some of the articles where they're trying to connect the increase of autism in children with vaccines. I've read some of that. I mean, I have a grandson who's autistic. I've taught autistic children. At one point, I had the sixth graders with Asperger's, which is like high functioning gifted kids who are autistic, more common in males than females. And so I had a couple of kids one year. They were actually twins, and they would be getting close to 40 now, I guess, if not already 40. But they would come to me for, used to be they'd come to me just for math. Then they started coming to me for math and science, because I taught math and science to two groups of kids, one in the morning, one in the evening. But that was the most they could function within a regular classroom with others. But so I understand the autism, and there is an increase. Maybe it could be an increase because now we're able to identify it. So who knows if there is a real or if there is a perceived increase in autism. So I understand that, but I really don't understand the ego of humans, more specifically American humans, who believe that my beliefs about vaccines are more important than what the medical community tells me because I don't trust the medical community. I'm wondering how sad of a life that is where you cannot trust the medical community. Now, I do believe in getting second opinions, but just blatantly not trusting anyone in authority or anyone with expertise and saying, well, me sitting on the toilet with my cell phone doing my cell phone research means that my beliefs on this issue and thoughts on these medical issues is superior to that of the medical doctor? No, it's not. Sometimes when I go to my doctor and I'm having an issue and I'm explaining to it and I'm telling this, well, from what I read, this could be this or this, and then my doctor kind of looks at me with a smirk and said, "Did you get that from Google?" And it's kind of the same thing. Well, I was taking my mother I had an appointment with her neurologist, and the doctor was wanting her to take a medicine. And my mother was trying to argue back with the doctor about, well, no, I heard that the side effects of blah, blah, blah. And the doctor looks and says, where did you see that? And so, and then the doctor connected what she was saying, says, well, what you were reading was an advertisement for essential oils or something, and those people don't want you to take the medicine because they want you to buy their product. And then actually when my mother got the prescription refilled, she hadn't started taking it. She says, well, I'm concerned about it. I said, so she would tell me stuff she saw. And so I did a search on the possible side effects of that medicine from reputable medical sites, not pharmaceutical sites wanting you to buy their product or wanting you not, but real sites. I was vetting the sites, And I went through and I'm reading. I says, Mother, I'm not seeing any of that. She says, well, I found that. I said, well, let's replicate it. So we went to her computer and we tried to replicate it. And we could not replicate exactly what she was getting without getting into advertisements that want you to buy their essential oils or the magic snake oil or whatever instead of the medicine. So it I put that in the area of scam. And I'm thinking, what is wrong with the intellect of the general American population? Probably 50% or more of the people, where they're so gullible they believe that. Why? It's because of their ego. Their ego gets in the way that they think that their access to information now makes them as smart or smarter than the doctors. And I don't think you need to be just blind and stick your head in the sand and do whatever, but you need to have those healthy conversations with your doctor. And if this is the doctor you chose and this is the doctor you trust, then this is where you exercise your faith. I have so many allergies to medicines that even when I go to the doctor and there's an issue and the doctor will look at me and say, well, in most situations, I would prescribe blah, 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 blah. And he said, but you have so many reactions to so many things is I really don't want to prescribe anything. I would like, usually what he says right after this, I would like for you to lose 30 pounds in 6 months and come back and we will recheck the numbers and stuff. He says, I really think with diet and exercise, we can handle this and we don't have to just jump into medicine. He said, because if we get to the point where we have to jump into medicine, he said, I don't know what we're going to do. So I trust my doctor because where he might very quickly prescribe medicine to someone else, he doesn't for me because he knows me as his patient. So I do trust him quite a bit. If I did not trust my doctor, I would find another one. So I consider myself a pretty smart person. So I do research something. When people tells me they're having an issue, a friend of mine is having trouble breathing, and it's like, well, why would she be having trouble breathing? Well, she's been to the doctor. She's been to the ER. They don't admit her. So they're doing all the basic tests, checking her oxygen levels, and they're not finding anything alarming enough that they admit her to the hospital. And she's going to this one and that one and that. And I thought, so what could the causes of those symptoms be? And so, stupid me, this is my ego. I just did my own Google search, but I do vet the sites that come up. I did my own Google search and what would cause this extreme shortness of breathing. And I'm going through, well, overweight. Well, yeah, my friend's overweight like me, and most of my friends are overweight. Anxiety. Yeah, she's suffering some anxiety things and changes in life, blah, blah, blah. Used to be a heavy smoker, doesn't smoke now. Well, even that in the past could be this and this. So I just screenshot it. I says, well, this is what I found on a search, and I'm thinking like, well, she probably did a search too, and it's like, and surely her doctors knew this. Although I'm a bit concerned that there isn't enough communication from her doctors. So, but you know what? If she trusts her doctors and she's going to those doctors, then she's doing the right thing for her. It wouldn't be my point to go up to her and say, you're not getting communication from your doctor. Has he checked these? Have you talked about these things? Then you need to go change doctors. No, that would be my ego thinking I know better than her and I know better than her doctors, and me pushing myself into that situation. So while an ego is important because you need to be, you do need to have a good self-esteem, self-worth. You can't be too down on yourself, which I also get accused of that by some of my closest friends that I talk very freely with. But you do have to have a healthy self-image. But your ego can't rise to the level where you're unable to listen to your doctor. You're unable to listen to the medical community. I really don't want to put any politics into my podcasts. I have a feeling during this year that's going to be very difficult for me to keep it out. I'm going to insert one right here. When the new president coming in is wanting to appoint someone who's against vaccines, who has no medical qualifications, in charge of the governmental division that oversees our medicines and our vaccines and everything, that is stupid. That's completely stupid. And so I have a problem with that. I don't want politics to be part of my podcast. I want to keep it out. But when we're talking about ego, this person who thinks they're smarter than all the doctors in the medical community and has been so vocal against vaccines, and why any president, leader, political party, or any human being would be supportive of such an appointment, is beyond me. I can't even begin to comprehend how that could even be a consideration. That would be, let's see, what could we put me in charge of? Putting me in charge of oceanography. Well, no, I do actually have some science background, but putting me in charge of the Navy. Make me Secretary of the Navy. I've never been in the armed forces. I've never been on a ship. I've been on a few boats, but I've never been on a ship. I've never been in the military. What makes me qualified to do that? Probably nothing. I would be a good Secretary of Education. I have experience in that field, and I have knowledge and expertise, and I have some ideas that would make things better for everyone. So if you're listening to that, president coming in or any president in the future, you need to select me for your Secretary of Education. But anyway, that won't happen. I think I am too old for public office, although almost all of the other politicians that are in Washington are much older than I am. Many of them are much older than my mother. So we do need to have age limits. Oh, I wasn't going to be political. Now I'm talking about age limits. Not going to go there. Okay, today's topic was about ego. You do need to have self-esteem. But when you think more highly of yourself than you ought to, and it gets in the way of ministry. I have sometimes been on church committees where people among the committee are arguing and being unkind with each other because each thinks they're more important than the other. I've even witnessed cases where someone asserts themselves as being the person in charge, and the person who's naturally kind of in charge of keeping things going is squashed to the point that they make an unannounced quick exit. Bye, I ain't fooling with you guys, and out the door they go. And so if you have to prove that you're in charge by getting out documents, then you're the wrong person to be in charge. The best leaders are the ones that have people following them because it's the right thing to do, and they know their hands are clean, their heart is pure. People that have to force people to follow them, terrible leaders. So that's a whole lot in order to have a conversation about this week's topic. I actually wrote a chapter on that about 10 years ago in an essay that became part of my book. Sometimes you have to stir the pot. I was going to read that chapter before this conversation because I was thinking, what are we going to talk about for ego? I said, no, I'm just going to have a conversation. I want these podcasts to be a conversation where we're just having a conversation. Yes, I've written a chapter on it on that book, but on purpose I did not read that because I didn't want my previous thoughts and ideas to get in the way of that. So this is what bubbled up from my conversation today to come out in next Monday's podcast. But thank you for listening. If you like this type of content, be sure to like, share, and subscribe.